I do want to introduce our sponsor for the event today. It's Accenture. They've been a great supporter of leadership programs throughout the region, I think throughout the country. And I especially want to thank Marty Rodgers, who's the head of it here, who a few years ago talked to us and said, we've got people in your leadership program. We got people in Montgomery, Fairfax, Arlington, whatever. What are you doing together? And it really struck me, it struck all of us that we weren't doing enough together. So he challenged us and said, hey, I'll help you all. I'll support something if you pull together a regional effort, bringing everyone from the different programs to do something. So that's really where today came from. We had done a few other things in years past, but today came from that. So Marty, I want to thank you for making us think regionally with our leadership programs. And I want to thank you and Accenture for your support of what we're trying to do here in the Washington region. So Marty, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate that. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is one of my favorite events every year, and we are honored to sponsor it again and we think of it as kind of an extended family and getting everybody together to, in this case, virtually connect. And Doug, as always, thank you for your leadership and your example with Leadership Greater Washington, but also more broadly in the community and the region. And I know the region coming together and thinking about where we're going collectively, where we are now and where we're going, especially at these critical times, it's never been more important. I also think, just to get us started, as you mentioned, we look at the leadership programs as fundamental to Accenture and to our identification and signaling of who the next generation of leadership is going to be at our firm here locally, and helping us develop that next generation of leadership for our clients, for the community, and for the firm. And I would just state unequivocally, Doug, that has never been more important to us and to the firm than right now. And the curriculum, the whole pedagogy, the idea of the leadership programs has never been more essential to the type of leaders we need now and we need in the future to be leading our firm. And so I really wanted to start by saying thank you to you and thank you to all the leaders of the different programs for navigating a really tough year. And I know we're on the COVID, and I know we've got a million other challenges that we've been facing. We've had lethal racism against African Americans and Asian Americans. We've seen continual challenges around income inequality. There was a piece in the Post just yesterday talking about the 400 billionaires in America making up something like 18% of our GDP now, over twice what it was in 2010. We've had obviously economic challenges, political challenges, social challenges, and this leadership team and the folks on this call have navigated all that and made it possible for us to be here today and continue to develop, to change their programs, to improve their programs, and to make the programs essential for companies like ours and other enterprises throughout the community. So I couldn't be more honored to be here. I don't think there's anything more important that we support locally. And we are grateful for you helping us create the next generation of leadership. In terms of that tough year, right, a lot of folks have had to transition and handle a lot of things in terms of moving programming virtually and trying to figure out, like, what do these programs mean and how do they interact and how do you get that connectedness and sense of community amongst the alums and the cohorts. How do we reinvent ourselves and remake ourselves and new lessons learned and all types of changes to the curriculum and new points of emphasis, et cetera. One of the things that I find really exciting, and we're going to jump into a couple of mentee polls building on the one Doug got us started with, is the evolution that these programs have taken during the year and the creative energy that they have demonstrated. And we'll have a panel today of the leaders of the different programs where they will share some of the changes that they've made to the program because of COVID, which ones they're keeping, which ones they're going to build upon, which ones they're changing, how the programs have transformed, new best practices, new lessons learned, new ideas, new inventions that they can share with each other and take across programs as we go forward. And so to get us started in that regard, we had a couple of mentee questions. Then we'll again have the panel. We'll have a series of questions for the panelists. And then as you hear from the panelists, we want to invite you, as Danny talked about, to put comments in the chat and or ask us questions either directly to some of the panelists or to the panelists writ large by putting those questions in the Q&A feature. So to get us started on the next mentee, Danny will walk you through the instructions again, but the key question that we're asking is, what is a leadership lesson you have learned in the past year? What is a leadership lesson that you have learned in the past year?
Sure. So again, we're going to open a new browser, either on your phone or on your computer. And again, put in the URL www.menti.com. And this time we're going to use the code 42190065. So again, that code is 42190065. And yep, you'll just see an open-ended box where you can go ahead and put your leadership lesson that you've learned in this past year. Great, so we're seeing some great ones roll in.
Yeah, so seeing empathy, seeing flexibility, resiliency, trust, patience and flexibility, listening is more critical than ever, authenticity, seeing empathy again, reduce business yields, creative thinking. I think we all face that challenge at different points in the year. Sometimes got to take the little bit of Frost there. We got to Robert Frost. We got to take the path less traveled by. People reflecting internally about their meaning and purpose, that they are more than a title. Again, empathy. That's a good recurring theme. Taking care of yourself before taking care of the team. Importance of EQ. Importance of strengths. True character is revealed in a crisis. That's actually one that has been a big one for me. Being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Importance of values, innovation. Again, flexibility and trust. Empathy and resiliency, and listening more critical than ever. Yeah, so these are really great, Danny. I think they're fantastic and give us a real sense for the change that everybody's been going through. And I think what you'll hear from the panelists is, this move towards soft skills and even more underscoring of the importance of soft skills because of COVID and the other attendant challenges has never been more important. There's also in here a lot of this notion about the need to how do you manage crisis? How do you manage more than one transformation that you've got to take and do at one time? How do you build resiliency of people and teams? So I think those are all really key. We're also hearing, and this has been a big thing for us at Accenture, right? Like, how do you continue to build culture and values and sense of purpose? And the sense of purpose in responsible business and responsible enterprises is all the more important during COVID, and I think will be after COVID. We have, and some of these numbers will be a little bit shocking, but when you're trying to build a sense of community and family, we have 80,000 people that are now part of our firm since COVID started that have never met live an Accenture person and have never been in an Accenture office. Right. So how do you build that community, that culture, that sense of place and belonging? And then again, a lot of these, Denny, and you see a lot of the soft skills and the importance of authenticity, empathy, humility, cultural competence, especially in light of what has happened. And authenticity is that making sure that people can see that when they can see into your living room, and you're in your house, then they're seeing a different part of you and knowing whether or not it's authentic. And then there's this continual learning, and I think the leadership programs are part of that continuous learning. We've had over 100,000 people that we've had to get new certifications for new parts of our business, and we've had to get over 400,000 people trained up on new emerging technologies, and all of our people trained up on anti-racism training, just as some quick examples. So Danny, if it's okay, can we move on to the next question?
Yep. So again, you should be up in your browser at www.menti.com. And it's actually the same code. So if you entered an answer for the last one, you should already be seeing this prompt at the top of your screen. So what focus areas should our leadership organizations be most engaged in today? Again, the code is 42190065.
Okay, they're starting to come in. Healing our communities from the collective trauma of the pandemic, the innovation for remote workers, ongoing need for tech learning and tech skills, equity, inclusion, and diversity. Another one for equity, inclusion, and diversity. Innovation. What's moving forward in the new normal. Again, some of these soft skills, and which are really the hard skills of kindness, empathy, accountability. Making sure people understand context and history, diversity, creativity, values-based leadership, how to make sure we're healthy mentally and physically and reopening safely. Equity and not empathy, tolerance, both and are possible. Pressing the reset button. I love that one for the new world. Again, a lot on equity and inclusion. Yeah. So again, these are great. We really appreciate the active participation and thoughtfulness of the responses here. Revolution versus evolution, true innovation, and again, value-based. So this is really great. I think it also sets a really great context for us as we start to now transition into the panel. So we've assembled the leadership of really amazing community leadership programs. We're going to have each of them present for 3 minutes, and these are not commercials, folks. These are them building on the Menti questions that we just shared. And they will also address 4 additional questions, and they can choose which ones they want to address. But we've asked them to also think about what aspects or changes have you made in the past year due to COVID that you're going to carry forward? What do you think the ideal role of your leadership organization should be within the broader community? And how does that contrast with the role it plays now in light of COVID? What tools can leadership programs use to invest in their community's growth and development? And then what is the role of community leadership programs regarding helping members sustain connectivity, collaboration, and creating positive community impact? So we're going to have each of the presenters, they're going to go kind of relay race style. They're going to have 3 minutes, and then they're going to pass it off to the next person and build on the prior person's comments. Again, you have the chat function if you want to add comments or thoughts, and then you have the Q&A function if you want to have questions to specific presenters or to all the presenters. And then after the presentations, we will move into a Q&A formal session after that. And so as part of this, each of the speakers is also going to, when they're doing the handing off of the baton, they're going to share a fun fact about the next person. So to get us started in that regard, I have the pleasure of passing the baton to Marva Jo Camp, who is the Executive Committee Chair for Leadership Prince George's. To get us started with her fun fact, she's an amazing community treasure, and she's super engaged with the Prince George's African American History and Culture Museum. And Marva Jo, I want to come visit as soon as it's open to the public and able to with COVID and everything. We've been doing some work with the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and so I want to see what's happening there in Prince George's. And both of Marva Jo's daughters went to Spelman, and she's a proud AKA. And Spelman's where many of my mentors and sheroes are from, and where my youngest wants to go. And with that, I will pass it over to an amazing leader, Marva Jo.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to apologize for the darkness of my screen. I have tried every which way to lighten me up, but it's not working. And so thank you, Marty, for the introduction. And you must know me well, because everything I talk about always starts with my children. So the fact that you highlighted that as your fun fact makes you very special. So I wanted to merge a couple of the comments that we were asked to speak on, and I know we only have three minutes. COVID did something bad and something good. The bad was we can't be together. The good was it gave us a chance to slow down, or at least presumably slow down. And one of the things Leadership Prince George's is an all-volunteer organization and has been so since almost the time that it started. Sorry, of course it would ring right when I'm saying something. And so one of the things that we struggle with all the time is how you provide premium service and still as volunteers. We have found a model that has worked, and I have an incredible group of boards and committee people who have just been so very committed. So one of the things that we struggle with is community trusteeship is the centralization of what we do as Leadership Prince George's. And what happened is, as we were doing the classes and doing the leadership development, we found that we were greatly expanding our community trustee activity. And with all volunteers, it really became a lot to do both. And so one of the things we did was partner with a developer. And we finally, it will open this year, have our own office that we own. And it was a partnership between the developer and the leadership program that would allow us to expand what we're doing in the community. What's significant about that, and what I wanted to share, was it is also, we created a new entity called the Leadership Institute. What it then means, we have two groups, the Leadership Prince George's and the Leadership Institute. The Leadership Prince George's will continue to provide the leadership development training through the 10-month program, but the Leadership Institute will take on our community trustee activities, whether that is our Emerging Leaders program for for high school students, whether it's our Young Professionals program, which we call the Breakfast Club for young professionals under the age of 40, whether it's our partnership with Prince George's Community College, where we're bringing academicians to do a think tank. Everything will be housed within the Leadership Institute. So as a graduate of Leadership Prince George's, I will have gone through that leadership development training with community trusteeship being a central part of it. Once I graduate as an alumni, we then take them into our Leadership Institute, where we hope that they will continue that trusteeship activity that they're engaging in, and then the two will kind of come together. But for COVID, I don't know that we would have had the time to really be as thoughtful about how we wanted these two programs to intermingle. I think the other thing for us is, by doing this Leadership Institute, we are able now to pull more from the community and more partnerships. So where we might have sponsorships in leadership, Prince George's, as part of our leadership development training, here we are having ongoing partnerships. As I mentioned, the community college, the Chamber of Commerce, Prince George's Chamber of Commerce, the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce. So it's an integrated program where we are the facilitator of bringing, and I say we are the cog in the wheel, where we're bringing all of the other community trustees together to do this program. And so we are excited about that. And I think in my comments, I'll end with this, that COVID people have been very sad. I've seen very upset. I have used it as an opportunity to reflect. I think Leadership Prince George has used it as an opportunity to reflect and to grow and to see how we want to grow. And so we are excited about the opportunity to bring Leadership Institute on and to have more people engaged in that kind of partnership that we think is essential if we're going to improve the quality of life. And then I said it was the last thing, but this really is the last thing. And the Leadership Institute also is not just about Leadership Prince George's, it's about the region, and understanding that no particular county or area is an island unto himself. So, which is why I love what we're doing today so much, is because we're not going to grow as a region if we don't all come together and look at best practices that each of us have, so that we can be better and the whole region is better. So with that, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to talk like a running engine so fast, because I was trying to get it all in. But it's just, I get very excited when I get to talk about Leadership Prince George's. So now I will turn it over to Karen Cleveland, who is President and CEO of Leadership Fairfax. Karen has spent the majority of her career leading nonprofits and serving the people of Northern. Karen is a certified leadership coach, trainer, and master facilitator who dedicates herself to developing leaders and supporting the underserved in the community. Karen, your turn.
Marva Jo, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Marty, let me thank you, first of all, for all the wonderful people that you do send through our programs. And additionally, for mentioning culture today, because I think the thing that rings the most true for me during this COVID year is the importance of aligning your culture and the values of your organization. And if you're constantly looking at those and refining your vision, then I think you have a really strong foundation to make it through any crisis. Because when I think about the future and how do we go forward after all of this learning, what comes to mind the most is the importance of us having fully integrated partnerships within our community writ large. You know, when we were all established, we were established to develop and connect community leaders. And it was kind of a new approach back then to bring together people from the varying sectors, you know, government institutions, we all know this, business and nonprofits. And each of us have evolved a little differently because of the demand of our constituents. Well, several years ago, our partner organization started really requesting, and quite frankly, even demanding, that we would couple along with the issues work and community work, a deeper dive into leadership development. So we established a faculty and have continued to work on that. And each year we challenge ourselves to take it deeper and deeper. And back in 2015, we had a new realization when we did an equity growth profile in Fairfax County, that the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion for everyone in our community was the answer to building a sustainable community where everyone feels welcome and everyone can thrive. So thank goodness we started working on that in 2015, because it has clearly been an evolution, but our work, particularly this year, in training our folks on how to have difficult conversations, how to engage in dialogue around charged issues, has really opened up everything for us in a way that COVID actually in the virtual world enabled us to explode in, because there was more access to the right places and the right people to train and engage. So we're really grateful for that opportunity. And I will say, I am in awe of those of you who have been able to say, we've been able to sit back and reflect more. I feel like the energy and amount of work to learn how to do this well and continue to deliver has been like a race, like Marvin Joe said, that it really is a race. But for us, I believe that our future lies in our strength to really engage and be effective cross sectors. And then, as Marvin Joe said, and Doug so beautifully, that it's important for us to really make sure that while we can focus on our local communities, because there's plenty to focus on there to be successful and to affect sustainable change, that realizing that leadership has no bounds and no boundaries, certainly no geographic boundaries. So we need to be collaborating more intensely in order to build a strong region, a strong country, and a strong global community. So I'm grateful for the opportunity today, as well as the opportunity to have partners like all of you in this work. So let me turn it back over to Doug Duncan, who, as we all know, has been a regional leader and so important to us for over 40 years. Doug, over to you.
Karen, thank you very much. Good morning again, everyone. Great to be with you. When I was preparing for comments today, I thought back a year ago. I thought pre-COVID, what were we like as an organization? What do we do? And, the one word that really struck me was slow. That if we wanted to do an event, if we wanted to highlight an issue, we had to line up speakers, we had to line up a place to have it, we had to line up a sponsor, we had to give people enough advance notice so that they could come to it. And then, so it just took time to do things. And then COVID hit and slow wasn't available anymore. We had to respond very quickly. I mean, within a day, I think we decided, 1 or 2 days, we decided to shut our offices down and move everybody home, and then sort of continue the effort from there. But then we also had to look at how do we change our offerings to make us more relevant to meet the needs of our members. So in many ways, this last year with us working remotely has been very good for us because it's forced us to be much more creative, much more innovative, much more responsive to our members. And we've really turned, I think, as our chair, Mahan Tavakoli likes to say, we've sort of turned the emphasis from LGW, the organization, to the members of LGW, and how can we help promote them, spotlight them, help them do the great things in the community that we're doing. So we when COVID hit, we started with what we called Frontline Conversations, and it really was, here's how you run a remote meeting, here's how you run a Zoom meeting, here's how you manage remotely, here's how you do those kinds of things. But then we quickly saw everybody was doing that, so we shifted to, what are some of the unique things we can talk about, and we then started interviewing our members about their personal experiences with COVID, what it did to the business, things they had to do, what leadership lessons they have learned or are learning as they go along. And those proved to be very successful. And the beauty of that was when the racial unrest hit, we just moved very quickly to spotlight that particular issue. And we got our members to talk about what it meant to them, their feelings, where we should go as a region, as a nation. And again, if we had been pre-COVID, it would have been 3 or 4 months before we were able to put something together like it. We did it in less than a week. And we're getting great response from people, great participation, because you didn't have to show up. You could just tune in when you wanted. We recorded them so people could watch them if they weren't able to make the time. So it made us much more responsive. And again, much more, I think, a much greater value for our members. And we've also started these webinars of sort of thought leadership in terms of business and futuristic visions of where we're going to be in the next few years. They've been very well received also. And we shifted towards a much more of an equity-focused basis or purpose for our organization. So we now run anti-racist leadership series. We've done, we're in our 3rd one now. And they've been very successful. They've actually been a good source of revenue for us, but it really focuses on the topic of the day. And we're looking at continuing that. And we're looking at what other types of issues can we bring to our members and create sort of these series of programming. maybe conscious capitalism, maybe something else. But we will certainly work on all that. I will say that one thing we're going to do more of in the future is be more of a convener. I think with the Federal City Council, with COG, with United Way, with other groups, we need to be, I think, a bigger player in terms of addressing the issues that this region faces. And we need to bring these groups together on a regular basis, the leaders of these groups together on a regular basis to talk about these issues. And I think that will be a big help for the region and a big help for all our organizations. And the other one, and you've heard it from Marvin Joe, you've heard it from Karen, but it's partnerships. We are into partnerships more than we ever have been. And we really can't make things happen unless we partner with other organizations. And we started partnerships with Leadership Greater Chicago, Leadership St. Louis. We're looking at Leadership Pittsburgh now. But the partnerships with all the regional leadership groups here, but also other organizations that aren't leadership groups. What can we do to partner with you to help advance the cause of the region? So it's a very exciting time for us. We're very excited about the future of the organization. And the direction we're heading in. And I think we've got a very bright future for the region as a whole once we all get vaccinated, once we all can get back together. We will keep a lot of the things we do virtual because we are getting attendance from people, not just around the country, but around the world, which is great to see. But we'll also start meeting again in person and doing things to make that connection. So I want to now turn it over to Susan Horn, who serves as the president and CEO of Lead Virginia, based in Richmond. Prior to that, she lived and worked in Northern Virginia, serving as CEO of Leadership Fairfax for 15 years, and she served on the Leesburg Town Council as vice mayor. So from one elected official to another, Susan, great. And she also believes in the power of open minds and open hearts as you nurture and grow our communities, our regions, and our states. Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. I'm off of mute. I just saw that I needed to do that. Thank you, Doug, and your team at Leadership Greater Washington for hosting this. Thank you, Marty and Accenture for sponsoring and for being the spark to get this conversation going. I think the more opportunities we have to share ideas, to share how we're all evolving and growing through what's been a really challenging year now into a second year is a healthy process. Lead Virginia was started in 2005, and we have over 700 alumni across the Commonwealth of Virginia. The program is modeled on the theory of social capital. Social capital connotes building trust, building relationships, building a sense of understanding among people who are in positions of influence, whether they are business people, community leaders, education leaders, nonprofit, government, et cetera. So across the spectrum, helping people build an empathy through a sense of emotional intelligence, a sense of cultural competency, those kinds of traits and skills help us all to be more empathetic, to be more understanding. And Virginia, as you all know, is a very, very diverse state. We are talking about the Shenandoah Valley and to Hampton Roads and the far, far southwest of Bristol and Abingdon and Northern Virginia and Southern Virginia. We're talking about a cross-section of cultures, of people, of economies, of drivers that are impacting the greater Commonwealth of Virginia. And we are trying to build an understanding, create an understanding among leaders who are changing their perceptions, frankly, building a new sense of what it means to be a steward of our own communities, but also a steward of the greater Commonwealth and what that means. I actually went, when I was with Leadership Fairfax, I went through Lead Virginia, the second year of the program. And for me, it really opened a window for me onto the soul of Virginia. I had a greater understanding of what some of these communities were up against. I had a greater appreciation for the leaders and honestly a love for what they were, how they were wrestling through their own challenges and the extraordinary love for community, the extraordinary appreciation for what they were what they were up against. So we're living in a very complex world, as we all know, and we appreciate, there's my timer, we appreciate all the work that every one of these community leadership programs and statewide leadership programs are doing. So I look forward to hearing from Renee. I'm going to introduce with Leadership Maryland, but I'm going to introduce Stacy Hunt, my friend from way, way back. Stacy is the CEO of Leadership Howard County. She believes strongly in the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote that we all need to fight for the things that we care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. Stacy.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Susan. And actually, a big thank you to the Leadership Greater Washington team and to Marty for helping put this together and giving us this opportunity to talk with each other. And that has really been one of the significant gifts of COVID and the pandemic positives that we all try to continue to highlight in our work and in our personal life, because we have reached out and connected across the country much more during the past year with this and have supported one another in so many ways, from some of the converts that Doug mentioned about just, how do you use these crazy virtual tools that we have to now, use every day and every hour of every day, to just one of the most important parts that I have found that has been really critical for our organization in our own community of, Howard County, but also with our colleagues that are across the country that, we have known, through many years, which is that time to check in and to check in with them personally and making sure that they have that opportunity to share what's going on and talk about, the emotional challenges that this past year has provided. I have found that I can't jump into my meetings and programming and conversations with people and just get right to the work. I have to create that space and that opportunity to find out how each person is as a human being, what's going on, and what do they need to talk about. And so we had to change a lot of our programming of our both our alumni and our session programming to build that space in a new way, not just around issues, but around individual. I sit on the board of the Horizon Foundation, which is the health foundation of our community. And they have an initiative called Emotional Support Humans. And I really took that to heart over this past year, that I feel, and I've really encouraged others, in our organization to make that space and make that time. And I also, it really paralleled and went along with all of the work that was going on and all of the issues that had been raised, not just about equity issues based on with the pandemic and the people who lost their jobs because of the type of industry they were in, but it also with the equity issues around race that also have come up during this time frame. And so you have all of these different areas that need even more of our time and attention as leaders to really focus on making sure that people are feeling heard, that they're feeling that people are there to support them, that kind of check-in. So our organization has done a lot more work in that arena. So that would be a key part of the shift that has gone on. I also agreed with a couple of my colleagues around our role is really around that being that convener, but it's not the convener of the usual suspects, those folks that we've always been working with in our community, but it's those voices that are not feeling invited to the table, that are the leaders in nuanced ways that are getting things done, and the pandemic especially highlighted, the people that stepped up and created, food distribution networks that aren't affiliated with anything. And those kind of folks that have shown how important it is to empower leaders at all these different levels of our community, not just the higher level contacts in a business environment. And so we're doing a lot more work in our own community around making sure those folks are done, so that developing, that connecting, and that serving is being a much broader array of people that we're trying to make sure that are getting invited to engage with us. And my time is up. And so with that, I would like to share the introduction for our next wonderful community leader. And that is, I have the pleasure of introducing Dana Pauley, and she's the Interim Executive Director of Leadership Montgomery. And she shared with me that Leadership Montgomery's graduates and members average 30,000 volunteer hours annually. Dana?
Thank you, Stacy. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank LGW and Accenture for providing the opportunity for me to participate in this wonderful panel for a great discussion. So I want to quickly start with us in the beginning of 2020. We ran 3 leadership programs, each one tailored to a professional at a different point in their career. We had a corporate volunteer council that worked with companies to either start or grow their structured employee volunteer programs. We had a new racial equity action leadership program that addressed racism and equity at a systemic level. And we had a variety of events and trainings that we were offering. When the shutdown happened, we looked at the value that we bring and focused on the parts of our mission that we were still able to provide since we couldn't be in person. And thinking about our network, we knew we needed to focus on educating, inspiring, and connecting while innovating the programs, trainings, and events since we were not able to be in person. Through this time, we have highlighted different leaders. We've created space to address difficult topics, including the racial uprising. We were able to host a community town hall that had over 250 people participate in it. And we transitioned our leadership programs to a hybrid model. We're seeing the real value in the way that we're operating those leadership programs. Being able to keep people connected, to continue to have conversations has been really, really vital during this time. We've been guided by the trust that we have in the community and our ongoing commitment to inform leaders and give them ways to be involved or to grow. So we're now sitting at this really critical time where we're able to look back on everything that we've done in the past, our history, look at what we've been able to accomplish in the last year so that we can be joyful and optimistic for the future of community leadership programs. I think what's valuable and what a lot of the other leaders have highlighted today is the opportunity to take a look at who is in our networks, the partnerships that we currently hold, the partnerships that we have the opportunity to grow, and how we'll be able to marry those and bring those all together to really think about the movement building that we can do in our respective areas. I think for us, the next process in our journey and in our future is to think about the impact that will come out of the participants of our leadership programs, the participants in our corporate volunteer council, the participants in our equity work, and to see what they're able to do with their own professional lives, the workplaces that they lead, and the communities that they're a part of. I try to be brief whenever I can, so I'm gonna stop there. And now I'd like to welcome our last leader for this morning, Renee Winsky, who is the President and CEO for Leadership Maryland. Her fun fact is that Leadership Maryland has nearly 1,300 members across the state and will celebrate its 30th anniversary in 2022. Welcome, Renee.
Thank you. I appreciate your introduction there, Dana. And it's kind of hard to go after 7 people who do similarly what you do and come up with something different to say. But I am going to reiterate a couple of things that I think are important. If nothing else, COVID has taught us to respect the virtual, but to appreciate the in-person even more so. Virtually, we've proven to ourselves and to our respective leadership that as community leadership programs, we can continue our good work and get things done. We can save time, we can save money doing so. We've learned to engage with people in a Brady Bunch world, all while wearing yoga pants and flip-flops. Many of the virtual components that we've learned this past year will carry forward in some capacity after COVID, if for no other reason than to be better prepared and have backup plans for the next emergency or, heaven forbid, the next pandemic. But never again should we take it granted for the moments that we have with people. I emphasize with. I will cherish the day we can safely be back in the same room or safely be back on the same bus. Human interaction is a key to leadership. It's our relationships. It's seeing and feeling the human reaction to a statement you agree or disagree with. It's the what's said in the room stays in the room feeling that can't be felt on Zoom. Community leadership programs remain that safe, respectful place where the hard conversations are better said and heard in a room rather than on Zoom. So during COVID, we all tried to mix things up. We all tried to do things differently, take on virtual experiences to our members in ways we, never dreamed of before. Some worked well, some not so well. But one silver lining of COVID for Leadership Maryland, and as we've heard today from nearly all of us, is that we found time to get off that monthly gerbil wheel of program delivery and move on to another wheel. And one that gave us all the ability to look at our organizations, to look at our members, to reacquaint ourselves with those who we knew were already great thought leaders, but rose to an occasion to shine even brighter during COVID. At Leadership Maryland, we tried to capture some of that as many examples have been given today. We started a podcast series, Engaging Leaders. Give them a listen if you're interested. They're all on our website. But I'm going to summarize by this. One of our guests was Elliot Fansteel. Many of you know Elliot. In summary, he said, leadership is not magic. It is not power or hierarchy or grandstanding. You can't lead a team of one. You can't lead yourself. You need others around you in order to lead. And I would argue that our community leadership programs emphasize these notions more than any other experience one can have in their life. I would also argue that we will all continue to do our work in our communities until we are either no longer needed or perhaps when leadership is deemed to be magic. I have the great opportunity of bringing it back to Marty. I thank Accenture and Duncan and the whole team at Leadership Greater Washington and all of my colleagues here today for their time and their thoughts and their candidness. An interesting fact about Marty is that he was engaged in creating MLK Day of Service within the AmeriCorps program. So Marty, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Renee. Appreciate that. Just going to remind folks that they can add any questions based on the comments that we heard earlier from the panelists into the Q&A function. And just wanted to thank all the panelists for their quick remarks in answering the key questions that we had put on the table. To get us going, I wanted to touch on some of the common themes and open it up to the panelists to respond to some of those common themes that we heard across the board. But the first one that I heard kind of loud and clear from everyone was there really seemed to be this need to focus and to change, well, maybe the better word is to say to double down, in some cases, the original focus that we had around inclusion, diversity, and equity. And there was a lot more programming, there was a lot more investment, there was a lot more interest from members and from alums and other partners. And I just would, I guess, get us started there around, is this do you think that this is kind of a once and done? It's a reaction to a moment in time? Is this a longer term ongoing thing? And then last adjacent question to that is it fundamentally just something we are offering to the members and to the alums, or is it actually changing how your organizations are functioning?
Marty, Susan Horn with Lead Virginia. I can jump in.
Please.
One of the things that we have done at Lead Virginia is, with great intentionality and sensitivity as well, is build a much deeper dive into the historical narrative in each of these regions that our Lead Virginia classes visit around the history of race in Virginia and how it has played out in these respective communities. And you can do that when you can do it in a sensitive fashion when you've got that sense of trust built within this cohort of people. There is freedom in conversation. There is freedom in expressing feelings. And it has played itself out in very meaningful and demonstrative ways. And this is when we've been able to do our class sessions in person. We had to go into a virtual format for a period of time. And as you all know, our programs are very experiential. You can do a part of it virtually, but you cannot replicate the experiential nature of bringing people together, sharing those conversations in a meaningful and trusting kind of way on Zoom. You just can't do it. So that's been something we've done. We have brought in historians. We've brought in people from Virginians for Racial Reconciliation to speak to our classes. We've offered the slave trail walk in Richmond. There are multiple levels of trying to build an understanding and an appreciation for a deeper sense of the narrative of racial history across these communities in Virginia.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate
Marty,
that, especially from the content side. And Doug, please.
Yeah, Marty, I'd say that's a question that a lot of us have. Is this a one and done, or is this going to continue for some time? We're all hoping that it continues for some time. We started our anti-racist leadership series really just not knowing what to expect. And we had close to 250 people sign up for it. And then we said, okay, that was a success. Let's do it again. And thinking, okay, maybe we'll get 100, whatever. We got close to 300. So we increased the second time we did it. So there is a real thirst out there. And we plan on offering this series once a year. It's one morning a month for 6 months. We plan to offer it once a year for the foreseeable future. And we're hoping that the interest stays and does that. The other thing that it did for us was we broke outside of our membership. We said, we're not just going to offer this to our members. We're going to offer this to anyone who's interested in this topic. And that has worked very well. So I would say about a third, 30% to 33% of the people participating in these series with us are members. And the rest are non-members, which I think is great for our organizations, great for leadership groups around the country. So that's been very helpful.
Marty?
I would agree with that as well. We're finding the same thing in Fairfax. And Marty, to your question about longevity on this, the longer, we started 5 or 6 years ago down this path, and it's like everything else. You peel back those layers and you realize how much there is to this. And I think that is an area where if we collaborate more, there is so much that needs to be done in this space. And I think that together, we really can start to make a difference in this and get more people to start thinking about it holistically and embracing it as just part of a new way of living life.
Marty, this is Marva Jo. I wanted to, a couple of things. One, it has always been incorporated in everything that we've done in terms of who we ask to speak, where we go, what we talk about, and just a basic respect of diversity. So I think that it was a natural for it to continue. But I wanted to say something different because I think conversations are always great. It gets to the implementation, and I think we're moving to that. And so I'll use this as my example. Serena Williams' husband owns a large company, and he made space, added a new position on his board for a person of color. And the question posed to him was, you could have done that as a CEO, and then he stepped down. And they wanted to know why he stepped down since he could have stayed and added someone. And he said, sometimes someone has to leave the table to add somebody new to the table. And I just stopped. And it was so insightful to me because we can talk about the change we want to see. But what happens if when you make that change, there's some shifts that also have to be made? And how do people handle that? How can they handle that? What will that mean different for people? So I think one of the things that leadership programs can talk about is what happens when you have to implement those discussions you have, which is not always easy. And so hopefully as we evolve, I think that becomes more complicated. But I also know that we have some dynamic thought leaders who can really help us move through that discussion so that we don't see it as sort of who said one and done, so that it is an evolution that we all grow together and everybody feels vested in that growth, and that it's not me or you, it's me and you. And how can we all, that I don't know those things, rise and ship, rise and something, rises everybody else, whatever that statement is. But we really have to, I believe, be so intentional and so thoughtful about that, and so ready for how difficult it's going to be.
Yeah.
Marty,
it sounds from everybody that it is both, it's changed both your programming and content as well as your organizations themselves. And I think as I pivot to some of the other questions, I want to keep moving to other questions. Karen and Marva Jo, you helped us actually pivot to a couple of the other questions we're starting to get in the chat, and would encourage others to add to questions in the chat. But Karen, you talked about, hey, there's a lot that we can learn on this particular topic, and we should collaborate more and work together more on this topic around equity. But there's a question from Beverly Hudnut, who is asking, how often do regional leaders meet and talk as a group? And is that on a regular basis or not?
I would say that locally, meaning regionally here, it would be kind of on a semi-regular basis. I think we have our go-to folks that we work really closely with. And particularly in the area of equity, we did a partnership this year with the Leadership Center for Excellence and Leadership Arlington to develop an institute for diversity and inclusion. And that, we were so grateful that they invited us in. It was something that they brought to the region, and that we were able to promote that without starting our own. Now that's specific to diversity and inclusion. We too, like Doug said earlier, are starting to work with other groups more around the country and other organizations around the world. So I think that I'd like to see us locally have a more regular meeting, because I think not only sharing what we're doing here and finding ways to collaborate, but also bringing that in, because we're all working with different folks around the globe.
And building on that, we do try to bring the Maryland, Virginia, Delaware groups together, a couple of times a year. The gift of the virtual environment has been easier than having to have everybody, get in their cars and take a whole day for these conversations. But the other part of it is the national organization, the Association of Leadership Programs, has really stepped up their game in this past year to make sure that the connections across the country have become much more accessible to everybody, that the learning and the support of one another has been there, along with the fact that we have colleagues in Rhode Island that have created a national network where they've been bringing people in across the country around really important topics since COVID hit. And so there has been so much more connectivity during the past 12 months in both the region, just because of the ease of using a virtual environment, and with the national organization and what they've been able to offer.
Awesome. Building on Marva Jo's last comment when we were going through the prior question, she talked about moving from conversations to implementation. And I just would ask the panel, during the course of the opening remarks by the panelists, there's a lot of conversation about new partnerships, deeper partnerships, bringing people to the table that hadn't been at the table before, and doing so with intentionality. There was a great phrase that was used around getting new folks around the table. So just a question to all of you around this whole, as moving from conversation to implementation, and the changing expectations for your organizations in terms of community solutions, both during COVID, but also after COVID.
I was one of the folks that did mention how we're trying to be very intentional with Leadership Howard County to make sure that it's not the same organizations and the same groups that are being invited in, that we really are doing a lot more work. And we're doing work with all of our community partners and relationships to expand that network of connections, not in all of our program, in our high school program and in our young professionals program. We partner with Loyola, and in our flagship premier program. But we need to make sure that these folks are that they feel that their voice is equally important and as valuable, and that it isn't just a thing we're doing right now, during this time when racial equity has been brought up, and that this is how we need to lead in our communities, and that we need to make sure that the folks that have not even actually considered themselves as leaders in the past understand what they have to contribute, and that whether we're highlighting them as organizations that we're meeting with and having present, or we're making sure that they're engaged as a participant in our program. And that requires, of course, extra support, because keeping people from being limited in their ability to participate because of financial resources. And so that's come into play with a whole new round of ways of funding that's important to have for each of our organizations, to make sure that no one is being left out because of the cost of the barrier of tuition too.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Stacey. And I love that phrase that you use, the convener of unusual suspects. That's awesome. That's great. Other thoughts in that regard?
I actually have a two-part response to that. I want to quickly go back to some of the comments that were made around the intentionality of equity work. So when we started our journey in equity, we took the time to reach out to all of our stakeholders across the county to make sure that we were understanding the thoughts that different leaders were having and where they saw themselves when it came to equity. And that is how we built our Racial Equity Action Leadership Program and the workshops and trainings that we now offer, because we do recognize that this is going to be work that people who have a true interest in it are going to embark on, and we want to be responsive to that. And we also want to make sure that we are thinking about the whole workplace, not just the leaders themselves. And that has also impacted the way that we do our partnerships. So when we have conversations with funders, or we have conversations with companies or county agencies, we're asking them, what do they need? What are they thinking about when it comes to how they lead, how they work with their teams, and being able to address what they're truly thinking about for their future of their workplace and their community.
That's awesome. Next up, folks, we have a question from Debbie Simpkins. As a result of COVID, have you noticed any gaps in leadership that weren't previously being addressed? I guess leadership could be at multiple levels, but have you?
Marty, I'd like to reflect on it
Sure.
in terms of gaps in leadership, in terms of age, experience, and wisdom.
Sure.
A number of years ago, we merged with Maryland Leadership Workshops, a youth program that's been around since 1955, longer than any of us grown-ups here at the table. And in that, when we merged, we realized that, yes, we became a leadership program from middle school to what we're calling rewirement. Those who do our program, who are in their older ages and thinking about retirement and wanting to figure out what they want to do when they grow up. So they are rewiring. And there are gaps in that leadership continuum. But it became even more prevalent during all of the social unrest that we've seen in our community, because 24-year-olds think very differently than 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. And so there's a skill gap, there's a culture gap. There are just ways of going about day-to-day business and operations that are important to a bottom line when your business model is you have to break even as a nonprofit at the end of the year, and a youthful mindset that doesn't care about the bottom line but just wants to share their experience in youth leadership and development. So it's been another COVID silver lining that we've had the time to reflect, and we've had the time to look at all the parts of our organization, and working towards making the whole, whether you're a middle schooler or a rewirer, and connecting those cultures in a way that we've never had to do before.
Excellent. Other thoughts on any gaps in leadership?
I don't know if I think it's a gap, but I think something that we were kind of thrust into COVID and we had to make do, because time just said you do it. But now we're going to come out of it and things have changed, like virtual. And I have seen that line demarcation between work and home has blurred even more for a lot of people. And so where they left their office and then went home and it was done, that hasn't happened anymore. So really taking time and coming up with and helping people make that transition back to going into the workplace. Or you talked about, Renee, the young people. I have 2 daughters who are fairly new to the workplace, where their new jobs, they've never seen the people that they work with.
Right.
They've only done it on Zoom.
Yeah.
They've not been in that space. So how are they going to make that transition to being in a workplace with colleagues and just being out? So I think there are a lot of things now that as we're moving our way back into the workplace, that it would be really helpful for people to provide some kind of help and assistance to that new transition out of it, since we never got any help with the transition into it.
Yeah.
And I think we play a great role there.
Marvin, Joe, the phrase I love was, we're not working from home, we're living at work now.
I love it.
It's really what we're doing.
Yeah, Doug, I'm gonna put that
Things
up because
dramatically.
that's what it feels like. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and Marvin, Joe, as I mentioned it in some of my opening comments, we literally have 80,000 employees that have never met another Accenture person live, and they have never been in an Accenture office.
Yeah, when you said that, my eyes just got wide because that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So building on that last question, the other thing I wanted to come back to in terms of the dialogue and the discourse around the leadership programs and where they are and where they're going, I would just be curious for, it sounds as though there has been this question, especially given the emerging needs of the members and the leaders, as well as the emerging needs of the community, that in some sense, there has been a doubling down, as Doug talked about, around, hey, we've got to get even closer to our members. We've got to get even more focused on our members, and alums, and even more focused on our direct customers. But then there's also seems to be this conversation around, we have to open ourselves up to new audiences. We have to think bigger and think wholesale, not retail. We've got to think new partnerships. So I just want to get a sense for, one, can you how do you see that evolving moving forward? Do both of those continue to matter? And then also the second question I would just ask is, are those two things ever in conflict?
Well, I just said, we're not going back. I mean, we open up a lot of our things now to non-members. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to try to grow that, expand that, get even more non-members coming in, because it'll help feed our membership. It'll give us a lot of benefits. So we're that's here to stay for us, and I think that's something, sort of increasing our visibility in the region is very good for us. In terms of conflict, I was trying to think. I don't really see any. I mean, there's certain things that we will be member only that we'll do, but a lot of the issue oriented programming we do will be open to members and non-members.
Yeah, Marty, a number of years ago, we started doing a little bit of the consulting, kind of outsourcing of consulting, and played with that. What does that look like? Is it training? Is it facilitation or whatever? And where we've landed with that is there's plenty of opportunities to work with members and non-members out there, but we feel like we are really making a contribution to the community if we assist in facilitation around things that really do impact the community. So to Marva Joe's point about shifting from dialogue to action, we really think of it as impact. So I do a fair amount of facilitation for partners out in the community. And it does what Doug's talking about too, which is the awareness of what leadership organizations are all about. It's an opportunity for that. But it's also surprising how many organizations, businesses and other kinds of organizations that are so insular that they don't see things the way we do every day because of the work that we do. So I feel like it's really our responsibility. The balance is not saying yes to everything and referring a lot of that work out so that it doesn't distract from our day-to-day work. But we're finding that to be a core part now of our program of work.
And I would build on that with the part of your question about, those partnerships and how does that work go, which is how important it is for these kinds of conversations and for us to be working with each other on our strengths and other community organizations in our community, because then we have access to more people, we can do a deeper dive, we can have a greater impact because you're bringing more people to the table, you're making more people aware of what is going on. And so that is such a critical component of this, is to not stay in the insular silo of each of our leadership programs, but to make sure that our tentacles are deeper into our community with new groups, and also that we're supporting one another in our work that is regional and it's national in scope, and that I think we're going to see more and more of that, and that we're going to have to figure out how the pie gets divvied up. I mean, we're doing partnership programs. There's one in a couple of weeks with our friends in Louisville, and there's a profit sharing component to this, so that we can all benefit from access to speakers from around the country. I'm seeing the future of leadership programs going into that direction even more than what we're currently doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Karen, and thanks, Stacy. We have a question from Matt Scacero. Matt is asking, and we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but he's asking, given the disconnect with expectations, especially with the younger workforce and population and versus some traditional leadership approaches, and this has been accentuated, I think, with COVID, there's all of this, everything has to happen faster. Pacing is more and more accelerated. And the younger generation is basically saying, especially, hey, let's not do a SWOT analysis and then a study and then analyze. We just got to go do, right? And minimal viable product and all of that, and more agile and learn fast, fail fast, and keep moving. And so he's asking the question, how can leadership programs specifically help navigate and adapt leadership approaches to bridge the gap and expectations around, hey, we got to do more and more, faster and faster. And how do you get people from moving from analysis paralysis to this new world that COVID has helped accelerate of, hey, we got to do multiple things at multiple times, and we got to move more quickly to implementation and execution.
So Marty, since I kind of opened up that part of that conversation, yeah. I think one of the difficult challenges is that when we, meaning, those of us older, we work 9 to 5. And when we do our volunteer work, it's generally 9 to 5. We're on boards, we're on commissions, we're on things of that nature. Not all, but I mean, a good amount of it. And younger people, their volunteer time, they're young in their careers or they're in college. And their work from 9 to 5, they can't step away from. They can't transition to a board meeting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. So their volunteer time is 5 to 9. And I think we, as those 9 to 5ers, we need to be open to Sunday afternoon meetings and Thursday evening meetings at 9 o'clock, and doing things to engage with them on their time, because probably easier for us to engage than it is for them to change their virtual classroom because they're teaching all day long. Not that one person's job is more relevant than the other, but we all need to find a common space. We need to find that space to talk. That means that way to convene. And we're finding that to be a challenge, but we're working through it with our young people. And faster, better is better for everybody in the end.
Marty, I wanted to say, again, I'll use my children. They are that quick, everything's quick. And I akin it to the difference between me and paper and them in everything is electronic. And I wear them out because I use paper. I still have a written agenda book and they just do not understand. But what I have learned, and where this is one place I think dialogue is critically important, that we really need to understand perspectives and to have that discussion about perspectives. Because what has happened for me is that I share the way I look at things, they share the way they look at things, and we can then kind of come together and have a discussion. They have changed some things that they do. I've changed some things, but if I didn't take the time to get their perspective, to understand the basis for why they were thinking the way, or to just dismiss, we would have never had those discussions. And I have found in that process, I've grown, but I've also found that they've grown and been more open to things that might be useful to them as they, go on their journey as professionals. So I do think we need to take the time and to use our favorite word, intentional, about that dialogue so that we understand and know that we're on the same plane of discussion. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but at least means we understand and can offer some things that help each one of us grow. And then the other thing I wanted to say is you can't assume. I do a lot with the arts, and we did a program on technical, using social media and all of this. Well, we went into it with the assumption that it was the young people who were going to want the social media. I cannot tell you how many of the older were offended because they say they use it all the time. And so the other thing is we sometimes go in with assumptions based on age of how people are going to look at things. And I think we also have to be really careful not to do that. And I think that also makes for a more robust discussion and dialogue.
I'd like to build on that really quickly and connect it back to the leadership programs, because I think some of the things that Renee and Marva Jo have highlighted are really important when it comes to the leadership programs. We've all had decades of introducing diversity, but when we're thinking about today's workforce, when we're thinking about the people that we interact with in our workplaces, which is now little boxes, but at some point we will get back to being in the office in some form. We have to go further than diversity and start to talk about inclusion and the need for understanding that everybody brings their whole selves into the workplace, no matter if that's 9 to 5 or 5 to 9, or if they're working on Saturdays or Sundays. So we can't limit what we think about people and how they come to work based on assumptions of their demographic information. And I want to take this up. I'm almost done. I apologize. I want to take this moment just to highlight the importance of the human capital. And yes, we are all up here talking today because we are at the heads of our organizations, but our programmings and the things that we do don't get done without the teams that we have, without our volunteers, without our boards. So we have to recognize that it's a collective effort and a collective impact that makes the work that we do important.
Awesome. Thanks, Renee, Marva Jo, and Dana. We have 2 last questions from the audience that I want to try to get to, and then we'll close out. And we've had great audience participation. We've been north of 60 folks for the duration of the program, so really appreciative of that. Ati Rabani asks, the shift to virtual has fundamentally changed everyone's expectations, and this feels like a permanent shift. How do you envision changes to future leadership programs, and how does the role of regional leadership groups change in this new construct of virtual?
Well, I'll jump in and talk, I can emphasize again the point that we know we are already starting to take advantage of this tool to do these kinds of programs. And I don't think this is going to go away. I think we're going to get better at more sharing of content components, because there's always a place now for this virtual space for us to do things. And hybrid programming may be a very serious component of us going forward. We may not have full days together, in certain instances with our classes, even when we could, because it may be more efficient and effective to do a portion of the day, online to get some basic content done. We may ask for some more, preloading of content, where we have more things that are put up that are virtual presentations that have been done in advance for people to look at, so that when we do gather, it's an opportunity to dive deeper into content areas, and we don't have to do the surface discussions as much anymore. So there's going to be a lot of ways we use these new tools that have come online to us to really strengthen our capacities. And we're all, I believe all of us on this panel today are doing things with our colleagues and our neighbors already. I'm doing a program in a couple of weeks with a national security agency that is an online tour this year, and there's a couple of us that are all that circle them and have an interaction with them that we used to be there on person. We're doing a combo virtual experience with them, and that kind of stuff isn't going to go away. We're going to try to keep doing that kind of interrelationship, interprogram connections, because as we all build our networks and get to work with one another across this region more, it strengthens our whole region to work on issues.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump to our last question, and I'm going to use it as a kind of a lightning round for everybody. Folks, everybody get ready. We're going to move really quickly. Gregory Shuckman is going to has this first part of the question, and I'm going to add to it. So here for all of the panelists, here's the question and my one addition to it. So Gregory's sort of feeling sort of philosophical today, and he's asking, is leadership something that can be taught, or is it a skill that people must be born with that can be further developed? So taught or skill? And then for all of you in your programs, now that we're kind of 1 year out from COVID, do you feel your program is stronger or weaker? Taught or skill, stronger, weaker? Taught or skill, stronger, weaker? Marvin Joe, you're up first.
I was hoping you would go the other order this time. So don't you want to start at the last name? So I was trying to think.
You got it.
Okay, go the other way. I think I think leadership skills, I think there's some things in us that are innate that can lead us to be good, strong leaders, but I don't think I ever met someone that we can't create some leadership ability in through a series of things. And I guess I was struggling with it because leadership is different things for different people.
Okay.
And so, leadership can be quiet or being, so that's one. And stronger or not stronger, different. I don't think it's either. It's just different. And we're growing based on that difference.
Awesome. Doug?
Taught and stronger.
Nice. Karen? You're on mute.
And I hit the wrong button. Taught and stronger. And just one elaboration. I believe that you can teach the skills, and then at some point, after they're fully developed, they become part of who the person is and no longer just what they do. It's part of who they are.
Awesome. Susan?
Taught, stronger, and richer. That's our program. Stronger and richer.
Nice. Love that. Stacy?
Taught and stronger.
All right. Dana?
Taught and stronger.
Awesome. I'm loving the optimism here too, by the way. And then Renee, bringing us home.
Combination of both.
Okay.
And stronger.
Awesome. Doug, over to you.
Oh, Renee, pick one. Don't give me this combination of both.
All right. I don't know.
There you go.
I'm sticking with both. I'm on the fence.
Marty, thank you very much for moderating this
Like,
today.
the politicians, they have to split the difference, right? So.
There you go. That's right. Marty, thank you very much for moderating this today. It's been a great discussion, a fantastic discussion. I want to thank all of our panelists here for all their great work, not just today, but throughout the years in terms of making our communities better places to live and work. So I do want to ask everybody watching if there's a survey link online on the chat. If you could do that and give us an evaluation survey, please complete it. Very short survey. We really appreciate it. And I'll just close with something that Marty's opened us up with, where I wholeheartedly agree with this. Our programs, our leadership programs, are needed now more than ever. I think we saw that during the pandemic. I think we saw that with the members reaching out to other members and helping each other out, that if we didn't have those networks, that community support, it would have been a lot tougher for a lot of people. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And thank you for being part of this. And Karen, Renee, Dana, Stacy, Susan, and Marvin Joe, thank you so much. And Marty, thank you.
Thank you,
for
Marty.
having
You were
us.
phenomenal.
Good to see everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody.